Hello, welcome to the Off by One Security stream on this Friday, May 17th. Got special guest Larry Pesce with us today. We have another stream coming up in a couple hours at 11 a.m. Pacific time with Yard and Shafir, so stick around for that one as well. But let's just go ahead and jump in and get started on this stream with Larry. So first off, thanks very much for joining, Larry. It's been hard to track this man down and get him on a stream.
There's not enough hours in the day, and my projects have projects, as it might be evident behind me by some of these drawers, and that's only drawers. That's only some of them, and the workbench that the projects gradually move down further. So, yeah, sometimes finding some time is hard. So, but
Yeah.
we're here, we're doing it.
It's funny sometimes when you talk to people, and I know everybody watching has seen this before as well, where like you're doing a video conference with someone and every once in a while someone's got like all these gadgets and stuff in the background or shelves with all this really organized little parts of things and screws, like which is that person's into some cool stuff. Like Monte Elkins.
Yeah, yeah.
He's got that van he drives around in, and he's got this like it looks like an FBI van or something, and inside he just takes it to random places and goes and works from his van, and it's
Yep.
all set up like this super organized vehicle with like shelves and tables, like things that you need obviously to
Yeah.
build stuff. So
Yeah, if I remember correctly, that used to be like a new TV news broadcast remote van. So they had like the little studio in the back that all the equipment was decommissioned, but it's got the tower for the antenna for doing satellite uplink and like
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
it's
He
yeah.
has a lot of free time, which is surprising.
Yeah, super cool. Like, when you're young, you want a sports car. I want to get this amazing car. And you get older, like, I just want a really cool van and I can do work in and be like a mobile hacker. So cool. So just a quick introduction. I've known Larry now for probably 15 plus years, I would imagine. I think. When
Yeah.
did you guys start the Security Weekly with Paul?
So we're in our 19th year. So
Okay.
it's gonna be 20 years coming up here pretty quick, and we got to figure out what we're gonna do for a party or something like that. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's
That's
arguably one of the longest lived security podcasts. There's very few out there that have gone longer, and most of them have all pod faded.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. Well, congratulations on that. But so, yeah, I guess it's been about close to 20 years since I first met you, which is cool. For those of you who don't know Larry, he does obviously, I'll let him tell you a little bit about his day job, what he can tell you. And then at SANS, he's an instructor and author of the wireless hacking course and also an IoT hacking course. So definitely anything having to do with hardware and wireless and all that cool stuff. I know a lot of you out there as well. It's not often that you get an opportunity to talk to someone who's an expert at all things wireless. So anything from like Bluetooth and satellite and GPS systems, 5G. I know everybody wants to know about 5G. It's an opportunity to ask questions. So definitely, if you have
Yeah.
questions, pop them up here. We'll get through it. We're not doing any official like demonstration or walkthrough today. We're just going to be going through some talking points that Larry has. Again, it's a great opportunity to ask questions on stuff like this where you don't often get that opportunity. So why don't you share a little information about, I guess, your background and working in this
Sure.
space?
Sure. So I arguably spent the last 15 years, easy, almost 20, as a penetration tester, and focused a lot on the wireless side, but did all manner of the enterprise stuff. Um, Hardware hacking, IoT was always a sort of a background passion, and then folded that into sort of the day job through the various companies that I've worked in the past. So, and IoT largely now, a lot of our connected stuff is all has some sort of wireless technology in some matter, whether that's LoRa, Bluetooth Low Energy, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, the list goes on. Zigbee, Z-Wave, and so forth. So the two sort of intersect really well.
Yeah.
So spent roughly the last 20 years in IT security, maybe even longer than that, as a pen tester. And then relatively recently, we're going. This October will be 2 years. I got out of pen testing. And the joke I am telling now is that I got out of pen testing to do pen testing.
Yeah.
So, so I got out of pen testing. I now work for a company called Finite State. We do supply chain security. Part of that supply chain security is through reverse engineering, binary analysis, automation to deliver software bill of materials. And then taking those software bill of materials, providing some enrichment, vulnerability data, threat intelligence, and so forth, and give folks the ability to have a priority about what they go to fix. Well, turns out about a couple months into the job, my boss says, "Hey, Larry, we've got one of our customers that wants to give us money to do a pen test, and we happen to have someone that knows how to do pen testing, especially on the IoT side in the company. Would you be willing to do it?" Sure. Are you signing my paycheck at the end of the week? Yes, I will happily do a pen test. And one pen test turned into six, which has turned into 10, and as of last week has turned into 15. So, and six more scheduled for the future. So now not only do I help supply chain security, do a little bit of thought leadership, some research around IoT and all that stuff, but now I'm back doing pen testing
Yeah.
and leading those services there. So, the yeah, and back to that, the whole thing that we we preach and we do at Sands is that the old joke is those who cannot do teach. Yeah, not in this case. I teach, but I am a day to day practitioner of what I teach.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Yeah, I got some DMs already, and you see Raj just posted a question here. I think there's going to be a lot of questions. One that someone DM'd me, similar to a question that I actually had, and I think it's partially similar to one of Raj's statements or questions, is the IoT space. Like everyone, there was a joke going around for a while there where, okay, it's getting too hard to hack Linux and Mac and Windows. So what's the low hanging fruit now? Oh, IoT. IoT's way behind, and it's on old Linux kernel versions and this and that. And obviously, we've seen that to be true. But like with everything else, things are getting better. So I guess one question is, in the world of IoT, take a current mitigation like ARM's memory tagging extension, which is a really nasty mitigation, and that stuff's now kind of inherently in a lot of these systems as we move towards the future. Have you seen a significant improvement in the security of general IoT, or is it still pretty far behind?
It, it's getting better. It's getting better, and again, it depends on the level of commitment from the individual manufacturer and some of their supply chain as well. I absolutely still see stuff that is the Wild West, and you talk about all of those types of protections like Stack Guard and Railrow and DEP and ASLR, and 70% of the time, and I'm making these numbers up, but it feels 70% of the time, none of that stuff is in use, or if they do have it compiled in the individual binaries, it's not supported in the kernel. So, and you've got to have
Yeah,
both. So there's still a lot of Wild West stuff, and some of my favorite things to do is just go to Amazon and and I say Amazon. Now we could certainly do this with any of the other importers like AliExpress and any of those types of things, and just go buy a bunch of cheap stuff and tear it
yep,
apart, dump firmware from it, and you're going to find all sorts of disaster there. Um, One that we did just recently, there was a company out there, and I don't want to really name and shame, but I'm going to name and shame.
sure,
It was at it's not Belina, it's another one. Um, just released what they referred to as their quote secure Linux-based operating system for IoT for being able to put in long-term devices, and it was definitely wasn't Belina. It's another one. It'll come to me. And like, hey, we're deploying this so that you don't have to rely on all these other things that have all these other security issues. And we want to be able to have long-term support. We know you want to put this stuff in locations that are very sensitive and need to have some security and have some reliability. So we want to support it for 15 years. And here's our initial release. And of course, I went and did some analysis on the initial release, and it's a train wreck. Like they focused on reliability, security, and stability to go into those type of environments for like automotive and healthcare, and
Yeah.
I'd argue they completely missed the mark, or there's something that I'm missing that is not the case. So, admittedly, we are getting better. It's a slow road. I still see stuff like it's hacking like it's 1980 something all over again. Um, we have an example in the Sec 556 for SANS, the IoT hacking class, and I had to go look the data up because this device that we tear apart, looking at the firmware, you talk about Linux security for your credentials, Etsy password, Etsy shadow. There's no Etsy shadow. All of the passwords are in Etsy password, and like they made that change in the 80s.
Yeah.
um, Arguably, there's only one user on the device at its root, so it really doesn't matter. But still, like, what happens in 3 years from now when you want to still use that same base firmware and you want to add a different user because you're starting to do the right thing? Yeah, now you've just got all that more work to do.
Yeah, and specifically the one item you said about oh, pretty much all your entire statement, but it made me think of this example where there's this vendor out there. I'm not going to name this vendor. I don't want to do the name and shame with this particular group. Their pitch is that if you're dealing with a system, like say it's a tank, like a literal tank in the military
Mhm.
that's out on the battlefield, or an airplane, a jet, or something that's like a system where you can't just go update it and upgrade it and take it in, and it's not some box sitting there in your house.
Right.
And so obviously it's a sensitive type of system. It's a specialized system like weapons systems and such. This vendor created a tool that is basically a compile time shim that gets in or sticks itself in there during compile time. And what they were saying is that most of these specialized systems are statically compiled. The binaries are statically compiled because there's not going to be any libraries there to load
Right.
and such. And they want everything to be static. So that was an example of doing it that way. Well, obviously, when doing it that way, if there's a vulnerability that's discovered in one of those statically compiled libraries, then that, even if you patch the system, that thing's still vulnerable, right?
Right.
So this tool that they make is a compile time shim that basically does randomization. So it's like ASLR at the function level. So function level randomization. And every time you run that binary, so every time it starts back up again, it re-randomizes everything. So the idea is that even if someone was able to discover the base address and they were to leak that out and they wanted to do like a ROP chain and they
Yep.
knew the static relative offsets, it doesn't matter because it
Second time it's
randomizes,
executed. Yep.
yeah, function randomization every single time. And we found some vulnerabilities in the way that they implemented it, but I thought the idea was kind of interesting. I guess I wanted to get your thoughts on a protection like that. Have you seen anything like that before?
I mean that reminds me very much of like address space randomization, the ASLR stuff. Um, and you go way more in depth in some of that stuff than I do in some of the reverse engineering stuff. But those are things that for most consumer grade stuff, you're not gonna see some of that stuff in your consumer grade. You might start to see that when you start talking like tanks and airplanes and more critical infrastructure type of stuff. But many of the manufacturers still aren't quite there yet. Uh, y-
Yeah.
I think there are some very few sort of areas in which that applies, and those exact type of things like the F-35, which is I, I I'm not dealing with any of that code because I don't have clearances and all that fun stuff. But I'd imagine that some of that stuff at that level is going to be using it, and yeah, most of the stuff that I encounter on any given day is not.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I'm posting this question up. You probably saw it from Raj, and it's a good question because a lot of people are interested, obviously, in car hacking. We saw many years ago, I think it was like 10 years ago now, almost, where Charlie Miller and Chris Valasek, I think they were working at IO Active or something, and they found some vulnerabilities in the Jeep
Yep.
Cherokee, I think it was.
Yeah.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think one of the vulnerabilities they found was like if you had a CD and the file name of a song, like a song title was too long, it caused a buffer overflow, which is hysterical. But they like obviously they were physically connecting to the car's electronics and they're able to do things. But wirelessly, we've seen people with the flipper and such go out there and like steal someone's Tesla. How
Yep.
is car security and such doing these days?
Um, arguably, it's getting better and getting worse at the same time. Um, it, we start to see a little bit of of both of those types of things. We're more and more wirelessly enabling our vehicles. We're making them more connected, giving us more opportunities for us to interact with those vehicles remotely, whether that be through cellular or through Bluetooth or NFC, RFID, any of those types of things, and even some proprietary type of stuff. Um, and it's all over the place. I think about something like like Tesla. There were some examples where the Tesla key fob stuff that they were doing for at least unlock was found to be weak and it was hackable. But it was a software update. It was a software update to the car itself. You had to go replace your key fobs, and Tesla didn't give you those. You had to buy the more secure key fobs. So like that's great. Like in that type of age when you can do a software update and you can fix security problems with your car with a software update, awesome. Um Honda, on the other hand, um, had some issues with same sort of thing with their key fobs, um, where the whole thing about some of the key fobs is rolling codes, and you have a unique code that is supposed to match a predictable pattern, and if it's used, it's already expired. Well, some of the folks that were playing with some of the stuff during pandemic time frame, and like a modern Honda automobile, 2021, 2022 Honda Accord, if I remember correctly, no rolling codes, no security, you just capture the signal and replay it. And like we're talking 2022, folks, like and the ability to update that, no, it is not the same level of connectivity as a Tesla. So like some are good, some are bad. But the more and more that we're enabling some of the wireless technologies is terrifying, and especially when we may not have the ability to update some of that stuff. Um, the other one on Raj's question here, I want to take some of the like, how do I start learning about CAN bus and some of the electronics hacking in cars. Especially when you don't have a car available. There's some irony here. This question comes up. I was just speaking with my boss and said, "Oh, hey, I was just talking to this guy and didn't realize that this guy was at this car hacking event that we did at Battelle, 10 years ago." And I'm like, "I was there too," and my boss had no idea. Um, the way we solved that problem, or where the way that problem was solved about how did we learn about doing CAN bus hacking, is you went and rented a car and you plugged into the ODB2 port, and like there was no security and any of those types of things. And then you start playing with some of the open source tools, some hardware stuff through like Adafruit and SparkFun are super cheap to get into. Some of that, there's a ton of open source tools for inspecting CAN bus and the messages and being to craft your own messages and sending that stuff. But you probably don't want to do that on the rental car, and that starts to get expensive. You probably don't want to do that on your or your significant other's car either, because, well, safety. Um, Admittedly, starting to learn some of that stuff by observing the low speed CAN bus, which is typically all your stuff in the cabin, like windows, door locks, your entertainment system. I mean, you're probably going to be pretty safe playing with that. Like, start up your CAN bus sniffer and roll the windows up and down. Capture those messages and see if you can then craft messages to make your windows roll up and down with the keyboard. Like, an absolutely valid approach. Um, some other options, stuff that I've seen out of some of the folks that we've interacted with. Uh, the joke is that they have a Ford on a board. Okay? They went to a junkyard and they bought like a Ford Focus, and the Ford Focus was part of their um, Focus. because the higher end Ford Focus had the ability to do the automatic parking system. So you could get those systems that would actually steer the car driven by CAN bus. Now, you don't have to get all that stuff. You can very much go and get a bunch of ECUs and some body control modules and some wiring harnesses, put in some sweat equity, and go get some of that stuff. Uh, go get it the display, get the speedometer, and start. So like the console in the display with the speedometer, the RPM and fuel and all that type of stuff, and start interacting with some of that stuff. Arguably on the cheap, especially if you're going to the pick and pull and doing it yourself. Oh, I think you're on mute, Steve. I think you're on mute. I can see your lips moving, but
I was on mute. I was saying, good tips.
technology,
Well,
technology.
somebody said in a prior stream, like, can you try to mute when you're not speaking? Because I hear a lot of background noise. So try to be cognizant of this stuff, and then we run into these problems. Um,
Yeah,
there's also
like we these are all lessons we learned during the pandemic, right? Can everybody hear? Can everybody hear me? Can
yeah, I've
is
heard
my camera on? Yeah.
good things about this class from Grim Cyber.
Yes.
It's a car defensive car hacking course and
Yep.
training. It's 5 days. They actually bring like the giant chunks of the car that you need to be able to do this stuff. So,
Yep.
um,
And Grim is actually the folks that coined the phrase "Ford on a board." So
okay,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
great stuff.
cool. So one thing I brought up recently in a prior stream, and someone was asking me like what the best way to go about doing it on the cheap is. And the thing I said was that when we bought the house that we're in right now and they installed the new alarm system, that they obviously everything's wireless now for the most part. You don't want these cables running everywhere. So you've got your wireless glass break sensors and door chime, whatever motion sensor.
Yep.
And that if you bring up some kind of a proper antenna or such, some wireless kit that you have, you can see the messages. You can start capturing if you know what frequencies and stuff to zoom in on. And what I found was that it was simply an XOR is all that was happening. And another thing had like base 64 encoding, and that was basically their encryption. But if you
Yeah.
XOR against zeros, it doesn't really do very much. um, so, what are your thoughts around that? So, if somebody wants to get started and take a look at this type of stuff, what's the way to go?
Yeah. Obviously, see what's around you. You're going to be so surprised that there are excuse me, so many wireless technologies at your location. And we have this as a little bit of a case study in the wireless class, especially when we get to into some of those more proprietary, non-standardish based stuff. Um, Most of the stuff you're going to find in your area is especially in the consumer world is going to be based in the industrial scientific and medical bands, the ISM bands, and these are specific areas of the spectrum that are allocated here in the US by the FCC and similar types of agencies worldwide for use by the public, so that I don't have to go get a license to
Right.
operate the little clicker for my lights. All of the certification process has been done by the manufacturer and to be used. So you're going to find a lot of stuff in the ISM band because not everybody wants to have to go get a license to operate the clicker to turn their lights on and off. Um, so using a software-defined radio, starting to look around with software like GQRX, open source software under Linux, the Mac, Windows, and you name it. And there's a bunch of other stuff too. Just start visualizing what that spectrum looks like. See if you can see things that are pressing buttons. Also, if you get hands on to the hardware, seeing what is around you is great. Now you may start interacting with stuff that's not yours, and well, that starts potentially getting some ethical stuff. If you can put hands on some of this type of stuff, um, super cheap, like think about the types of things where wireless might be, like doorbells, and Steve, to your point, the alarm system. Um, that was one of my discoveries. I was firing up my software-defined radio with a tool called RTL-433, and they make one for the Hacker F and varieties that you can use it with the Hacker F as well. So RTL-433, it listens to 433.92 megahertz, which is ISM band, fairly common. And I started capturing a whole bunch of stuff, like right here sitting in my office. Some of it was for my Oregon Scientific weather station. Yep. And then there was a couple of ones that I didn't recognize. And the tool had some decoders automatically built in with the tool to say, yeah, it's this thing, and its status is closed. They were door and window open close sensors
Mm,
for alarm system. And after a little bit of Googling, turns out it's for ADT. And ADT is one of the largest commercial and residential monitor alarm systems
yeah,
here in the US. And the next door neighbor had an ADT alarm system put in, and all of their stuff was wireless enabled.
right.
So now it becomes I can start messing with the neighbors and trying to do capture and replay, but that's messing with the neighbors. eBay. An unlocked ADT alarm system that you could deploy anywhere. I think I picked one up with the panel and like 3 open and close sensors for like $75. And student budget, that starts to get a little little tight, but arguably I can find 50, $75 to buy some stuff to start tinkering with for something like that.
So if you've got the software-defined radio, like I posted the link for
GQRX.
GQRX and
Yep.
such, what's a decent antenna, or what physical devices do you recommend? I guess on the cheap, but also like if you want to get something decent.
Yeah, so absolutely. I'm looking around my desk. I'm like, hey, I've got some of
Yeah.
those. Like, I know I've got some of those. But so yeah, I'm gonna slide over here, and I'm gonna pull one of these out of the drawer just because it's super easy. One of my favorites to get started with is the RTL SDR. So this one is from rtlsdr.com. This is the version 3. I'm not sold on the version 4 yet. Um, but the version 3, they're super inexpensive. They're this software defined radio is receive only. It comes with a bunch of really good antennas. um, and so forth. Loads of support for a bunch of different software, GQRX and so forth. Um, like $35
Mm,
with all of the antennas and tripods and mounting for the antennas and cables. And I mean, you can find equivalent of these types of things for like $12. And
wow.
it's a great entryway to start listening and observing some of those signals, finding them within the spectrum, um, start capturing signals, listening to them, start being able to recognize them by ear, doing some demodulation. So start turning that stuff back into ones and zeros, and then examining some of that type of stuff. Uh, One of my favorites for starting to go into like turning it back into useful data. RTL 433 is one. Another one is Universal Radio Hacker, or URH. Uh, and I love URH because it does, in many cases, a bunch of the heavy lifting for me. It can do some of the records of signals as you're pressing buttons and or observing stuff in the wild. It can figure out the speed, the modulation, and then can turns it back into ones and zeros. And much of that is you press a button and it does auto detect. S like,
Wow.
I didn't have to do all that hard work. I pressed the auto detect button, and it's really, really accurate.
Nice. I remember Josh Wright. You probably remember this video. Josh is an amazing guy. He did a video a long time ago, and he was outside of a Starbucks, and he had this D-band antenna, this big antenna, and he
Yep.
was communicating with someone's Bluetooth headset and injecting noise, audio, and such. Like, what was he using for that to get that wide range?
Um, so yeah, that was Bluetooth Classic, so Bluetooth 1, 2 area. And he was effectively pairing a small compute device with a standard Bluetooth adapter um, to another, like a Bluetooth headset. So referred to as Bluetooth as a listening bug. So like, so it's 10, 12, many years ago.
Yeah.
So sniffing Bluetooth was really hard. So the best way was to do direct interaction. Um, in that particular case, he was actually connecting to a device with a default pin and then listening and talking to whatever was going on with that headset, as opposed to doing like sniffing what was around and then doing the decoding, because that's arguably still a little hard. Um, and I don't remember exactly which antenna he was using there, but he was probably using something along the lines of a Yagi or a panel-based antenna. Effectively, the antenna design there narrows your beam width as opposed to using an omnidirectional antenna in 360 degrees. So you can get some more focused distance, both send and receive. Um, uh, to get distance and to be able to more narrow down some of the targets that you're looking for.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I tried to go find that video recently and couldn't find it. I know it's quite old, but it's
It,
still
yeah,
fascinating to watch.
it used to be on the Sans YouTube channel, like
Mm.
way, way back. Yep.
So I don't know if you remember this, but we had a IoT hacking night one time at a conference, and I've said this story before. One of the devices was this thing called a cloud pet, and it was just this little stuffed animal with a light on its chest, and basically a parent can send through their phone a message to their child, like say you're on a trip and you want to say something to your child, and the light glows on the stuffed animal, and the kid can push the light, and they hear their parent's voice, and the kids can also say something back, and then it get alert on the parent's phone. So one individual, Oscar Tejeda, a great guy, he was able to, it was Bluetooth Low Energy, so he was able to pair with it without any kind of authentication, and then there was a back door in it, and you could actually listen. So it was a spy device, basically, and it ended up getting pulled off the shelves because of this. But I guess that leads me to my question, which is Bluetooth Low Energy, is that something that's widely used, and is it always no authentication required?
So yes, there's a ton of Bluetooth Low Energy stuff going on nowadays. It's arguably one of the most adopted Bluetooth technologies. We still have the Bluetooth Classic and so forth, but um, there's a lot of implementation of Bluetooth Low Energy. Um, Overall, as a protocol, it's much easier to use. It's a little bit faster to join devices to the network because they took the original Bluetooth technology and refined it, made it a little bit simpler. Make it a little bit simpler. You take away some of that security through obscurity and some of the difficulty for interacting with it and so forth. Um, so it's interesting that you say, yeah, there was no authentication and there was no encryption. I'd argue that there probably was some authentication and encryption there. Um, but Bluetooth Low Energy has ability to do authentication and encryption that we see all over the place because it's super easy to use and it's known as JustWorks.
Mm-hmm.
And with JustWorks, you authenticate with a PIN. That PIN is used to derive some keys to encrypt your data for your individual session. The problem is to make it just work, you're not going to want to put a PIN in every time you connect to one of these devices. It's a default PIN of 6 zeros.
Right.
Yeah. So, like, it, no authentication. There's authentication, but everybody knows what the authentication is. And at that point, it is, in fact, likely no authentication. And that's always how I've perceived it. I see so many devices that leverage uh, just works and effectively no authentication, no encryption. Anybody can do it because they know what those default pins are.
Which is pretty surprising in this day and age. Like remember way back when WEP, the Wired Equivalent Privacy Protocol, was
Oh
out,
yeah.
and it wasn't until WPA then WPA2 came out, and then they basically start forcing you to do it because if you don't force people to do it, but of course they were worried because some vendors were doing the whole hey it just works out of the box thing, and
Yep.
because if you require security then it's going to annoy people and they're less likely to buy your product. So it kind of like has to be this group consensus, this effort that everybody says, no, we have to secure this thing all together now.
Yeah.
It's similar. Yeah.
Yep. And on the Bluetooth Low Energy side, very much so. Everybody's going to want to use JustWorks because it just works and it's super easy for the consumer. You can deploy some quote application layer security on top of that. So your app and your Bluetooth Low Energy device uh, could in fact implement some security higher up in the stack using a pin that you use to derive some encryption. And I've actually seen some of that type of stuff. We were looking at the early onset of Bluetooth Low Energy. We were looking for an attack target to give students in the wireless class, the 617 class, something they could take home and hack Bluetooth. And I found these really inexpensive LED light bulbs at Home Depot. They're like $2. And this is a time when you're trying to buy an LED light bulb, and the LED light bulbs were $15 and $20 a piece, and this
Right.
company had them for two. Uh, Turns out, yeah, they were using just works, and you could pair to them. But when you start trying to do capture and replay of any of the traffic, it was all encrypted, and it was encrypted at the application layer. And like, yeah, we didn't know what that encryption was at the application layer. About a year later, someone went and ripped apart the Android app and figured out how they were doing all of their authentication and encryption up at the application layer.
Mm.
And it was horrible. It's literally you put in a pin, a 4-digit pin, and then it became a shell game. Like, you take that 4-digit pin and you send it to SHA-1, but you take that SHA-1 output and you take the ends and you swap them, and then you take these 4 bytes and these 6 bytes to make a 10-byte key, and then if Mercury is in retrograde, you do this thing, and it was literally just a shell game with numbers, and the only thing that
Wow.
went into it was a 4-digit pin. So yeah, it was kind of crazy.
That's funny. Check out Raj's question there.
Yeah. So, have I hacked headphones in the past, and have I wiretapped into the mic using that method? So arguably that is exactly the same sort of thing that we were talking about with Josh's
Yeah.
method with the Bluetooth Classic headsets. Um, I have not specifically targeted headphones. They're just because they haven't had a need for me to do so. Um, I will also say that I don't have any wired headsets. You'll note that I'm talking to you on a wire. So, um, I have, for me, I just have so much other wireless stuff going around that interference is a thing. So wire makes sense for me. So I haven't specifically focused on that type of stuff. Um, Again, it will depend on the manufacturer and how they've chosen to implement it. Many of the headphones now are using Bluetooth, either classic or low energy. Uh, and low energy is a heck of a lot easier to get involved in from a traffic capture and analysis and injection standpoint, um, just because it's simpler and everybody has a as a tool for it. Uh, to the point that when we wrote the Bluetooth low energy module for the wireless class, uh, we actually had like too much content that we had to pull back the tools that we were introducing folks to, both from a software and a hardware perspective, to go really best of breed, because everybody has some Bluetooth low energy stuff now. I think I've got probably 2 dozen different ways for interacting with Bluetooth low energy sitting
Mm.
somewhere here in my office. And I know like one of them sitting right here with the Nordic NRF 52840. So yeah, it's funny that I can just pick that stuff up and here it is. So
Nice. So one interesting thing that comes up a lot is we get a lot of customers, we get a lot of students, and just general people still asking and wanting to know more about 5G security and how that whole thing works. And like when looking into it, there's a lot of legality type concerns. Like you're not allowed to do certain things. And as we all know, if you're telling people they can't do it and research it, then the hackers are still going to do it. You're just scaring off the people who maybe wanted to do some help. Do you have any knowledge in that space? Have you worked at all in that area? Do you have any thoughts?
So I haven't done a ton of work in the cellular space, and back to the whole legality thing. It really comes down to the legality. Um, Back in the Clinton era, here in the U.S., right before Bill Clinton left office, he signed some legislation that at the time, and I don't know if this has changed. At the time, it made it illegal to hack cellular networks. Like, that's a no-brainer. As part of that, it also made it illegal here in the U.S. to research hacking cellular networks. So
Yeah.
now, not only could we not do that, we couldn't research it. That just means that everybody in all the other countries did the research instead of here in the U.S. Um, the other one that is also a specific challenge for me is that um, all of the cellular stuff, 5G, 4G, 3G, 2G, all through all the range, is in licensed areas of the spectrum. Meaning, someone has paid lots of money to gain access to the spectrum. They have a license to do so, and for me to transmit into those specific frequency ranges would be illegal unless I had one of those licenses, and I do not. Uh, there's ways in which you can work with a cellular provider to potentially get some of that, and it's a nightmare to try to do. So I haven't done a ton of stuff in those areas, largely because of some of the illegality, especially when talking about attacking cellular networks. That said, there's stuff out there. You start thinking about Open LTE and Open BTS and I don't know how to pronounce it, Sirius RAN, SRS RAN, for 5G, so that you can take stuff like a Blade RF, a highly capable software-defined radio, or an EDIS like N210. You're talking a couple $1,000s for a
Mhm.
software-defined radio, and you can implement 3G, 4G, 5G base stations, and you can have your phones connect to them so that you can start researching protocols. But very much caution about how you're approaching that type of stuff, and that you might need to do that in a closed space such as a Faraday cage or something like. So you're standing up a 5G base station, and you could conceivably have your neighbors connect to your 5G base station, and yeah, have some potential issues because you're not allowed to operate in those particular ranges. So it's absolutely possible, and if you have the means and the ability to be safe about it, uh, would be really neat to do. Uh, that is one of the projects I'd love to be able to do. Is specifically start looking at some of the SRS RAN stuff for 5G, especially if I can do that safely. But
Yeah.
as I mentioned early on, my projects have projects, and I've got enough projects and stuff going on at the moment that I got to clear out some of the old ones before I get to the new ones.
Yeah, I've heard some of the stories or seen in the news about someone setting up, like usually intelligence agencies setting up a fake cellular tower, and so
Yep.
that people of interest will connect to it and they can track and find out where you are.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, back in the day, that was like the Stingray.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's a fake cellular tower that one you could provide service, and you could then observe all of their traffic past the encrypted cellular part because you're now getting it quote on the LAN. Also, all your cell phones have unique identifiers, so they could potentially note that specific people are within certain ranges of that those towers, so they could know that those folks were nearby. Yep,
yeah.
absolutely.
So Mohammed has a question there. The view of a Flipper Zero ban. I mean, I'll just say real quickly: telling in the United States a city that banning guns in a city does not stop the murders going on in that city. So I don't think it's going to do much. But what are your thoughts, Larry?
Yeah. So we've talked about this at length on the Security Weekly podcast, and this is very much comes down to some of the, what we really wanted to get into about this stream was about some of these wireless hacking devices. But this is absolutely great. But the short take on this is my views on Canada banning the Flipper Zero is ridiculous. Um, One, there's been no actual documented cases of anyone actually stealing a car with a Flipper Zero. So to ban that tool to prevent car thefts is ridiculous. Could it be used to steal cars? Maybe, maybe. I think there's a lot better tools out there for doing that, and they're not banning any of those. Um, I also think it's kind of ridiculous in that a couple of weeks later, after discussing that ban on the show, we had someone uh, take a software-defined radio HackRF, um, put that tie that to a computer, and created a I want to say Node.js application on their computer that they could connect to with their phone, so over the web. And then they used that setup, the hacker up with a computer with a Node.js application running on it, to hack a car to unlock it and start it. So now Canada needs to ban software-defined radios. They need to ban JavaScript. They need to ban computers, and they need to ban mobile phones because those can also all be used to steal cars. It-
JavaScript should have left with Flash, honestly.
I mean, you're not wrong. You're absolutely not wrong.
What's the
But
first thing that if you use the Tor browser, what's the first thing it says if you go try to go anywhere? Turn
JavaScript.
JavaScript off. Yep.
Yep. But the point here is like they're trying to play whack-a-mole to eliminate something that they perceive, in my opinion, that they perceive as a threat,
Right.
um, by some folks that are not ignorant about what something like a Flipper Zero can actually do and what the threat is, and that there's a whole host of other things that can be used, and that well, if you're going to ban the one, why aren't you banning all these other things? And then it's just not a tenable solution.
Yeah, I just checked the news. When you said that there's not been one case documented where the flipper was used, I just checked the news on Google, and every link is about Canada and about like yes, it's possible, but I didn't see one case example where it's actually was confirmed that it was done.
Exactly, and the legislators in Canada that started to push the stuff, some of the stuff from, like, I wonder where they got this bug that the Flipper Zero could be used to steal cars. Like, maybe they watched the video of someone using the Flipper Zero to open the charging port door on the Tesla, and like, oh my God, they're gonna steal it now. Like, it's what's that joke about the commercial where grandma is standing in her living room and she's got Facebook, and it's a book with a face on it, and she's putting pictures on the wall with thumbtacks, so she's putting pictures on her wall, and her friend is like, that's not how any of this works.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, this is not how any of this works.
Yeah, it's funny. Or like, what was it in Germany? I forget the name. It was like Strafgesetzbuch or something. I can't pronounce it, but that was like the German anti-hacking law,
Hacking
which
laws.
which
Yep.
affected penetration testers and researchers from developing tools and such. That stuff just does not work.
Yep. Yeah. So any hacking tool was banned in Germany for many years, regardless of what you were
Yeah,
actually using it for. They did end up revising those laws a
yeah,
number of years later to include intent. So if you were using something like Kali Linux to do some hacking, and you were an ethical penetration tester and you were doing the right thing and your intent was good, then yeah, you weren't going to get prosecuted. But if you were a hacker and you were doing bad things with hacking tools, well, now you're going to get extra, jail time or whatever the penalties
yeah.
were, and so forth.
Yeah,
So
Mohammed, I thought that too. And I saw a news story about people using a flipper to change the gas prices at a station. Same thing with obviously the signs that the zombies are coming on
yep,
the road signs.
yep, and I fully admit that is would be super cool. And I've seen the videos about the changing the prices for the gas station. Um, And my answer is prove it. Like, we're in a stage in our society that without concrete evidence
Yeah,
of that it's real, show me the code, show me the application, let me go try it for myself type of thing, that some of those aren't real. And my understanding
yeah.
on the one with the changing the prices on the displays, the gas station, completely fake. Um, there was another one where someone used a Flipper Zero to interact with their power meter on their house and like cause their air conditioning to cycle, and it caught on
Hmm.
fire type of thing. No, they bricked the power meter,
Hmm.
and then the power shut the power off, and so forth. Um, that one also up for significant dispute about what actually
Yeah.
happened, and like, okay, let's see the code, and
Yep.
no. So
Yeah.
yeah, you got to be careful what you're seeing out on the internet there, for
Yeah,
sure.
that same thing's happening with AI right now. We just saw an article published by 4 college students saying that they had this agent that could weaponize one-day exploits and do it all on its own. It basically was just a glorified search engine, going and finding other people's exploits to actually do. Like, show the code. Let's see what's going on there. Um, one other area that someone actually DM'd me on was around satellites. Have you looked into satellites? I remember like it was a while ago, but this guy who goes by Major Malfunction was his
Yep.
handle. He was a
Adam
black
Adam
hat,
Adam Laurie.
yeah, at
Yep.
DEF CON, and he said that he had from a TV provider, he had a dish and he used, I forget what it's called, like Dream something, but he was able to interact, and he showed this really amazing image. It looked like just a planetarium, like you're looking at the stars, but it wasn't. It was satellites, and he's like, each of those are transponders on a satellite. He's like, some of them are really bright, some of them are not bright, and he goes, over a period of time, he like showed this live animation, and it shows the lights going by, and then he goes, watch this right here, and it goes blip just for a second. He goes, that right there was a military satellite communicating. It only comes up for a short period of time. He's like, the real bright ones, that's direct TV, that's the big TV stations. And he was even
Yep.
saying how, like, way back when Princess Diana passed away, he was able to watch the news, where, you know how when someone's out there on the field and they say, okay, back to you, Bob, and
Yep.
they go back to the studio, that he was
And
able
they're
to
and they
continue.
and they're in Monte's van.
Yeah, he was able to continue watching the people talk at the actual site when you're not supposed to see that anymore. Like, what? I'll stop talking and let you talk about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely a thing. Like the satellites are out there. I haven't necessarily done specific hacking against satellites. It's a space security is a huge thing. They had the whole Hackasat CTF at DEF CON
Right.
last year, and the all the prequals were a lot of math and local stuff. But if you qualified and you were the finals, you were actually hacking, sending radio signals to space to interact with a satellite. Like that's cool. Um, and now with the advent of like much more consumer focused, more amateur focused, like CubeSats and that type of stuff that you can get to space on the cheap. Um, yeah, prime for starting to do some hackery because you're typically using some of the lower end gear. Um, Absolutely fascinating stuff. And you're saying like, hell yeah, hey, by finding all these satellites and you name it. One of the ones that I do is I have an RTL SDR tied to a Raspberry Pi sitting out on my front porch, tied to a helical antenna. The antenna was more expensive than the entire rest of the setup, and it grabs NOAA weather images from a bunch of different satellites
Mm.
going overhead. So they're all free to ground. They're all unencrypted. So you can go and grab satellite imagery. I think it was a Raspberry Pi image that I downloaded. It took me about 15 minutes to set up. Um, when I did it the first time, it took me about 3 days,
Mm.
and I had to have an Amazon S3 bucket, and it all that stuff has come a long way. Um, Another one that, and you say with the whole Princess Diana thing, and after that they're sending that to the satellite, you could view some of that type of stuff. Yeah, all that stuff is out there. Uh, one of them that just had some focus, and from May 13th on RTLSDR.com, the place that you posted about getting the RTL SDR, is Iridium satellite decoding. Yeah. Iridium, you know those satellite phones?
Yeah.
Yeah. Data and voice over those particular networks. Um, in many cases, the Iridium phone calls, the voice calls, are unencrypted. And
Yeah.
if there's Iridium satellites overhead with a specific antenna, and you can actually do it with one of these inexpensive software-defined radios, you can capture phone calls from satellites. Uh, and there's been a long history of uh, hacking satellites. In fact, there were, and I don't remember which military, but in the ham radio community, you see a lot of folks listening to these satellites because I want to say it was a bunch of Brazilian hackers actually took over a military satellite, and now the military can no longer use it for their communication
Mm.
because these satellite
Wow.
pirates have dominated the use of this satellite for being able to do all of their broadcast stuff too.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I put this up here right now. This is the old presentation from Major Malfunction from DEF CON 13. I don't even know what year that is. Well, 2013 it says. It wasn't DEF CON 13. Um, but it's a pretty neat present. I'll post a link to this one up there, but
Yep.
it goes through kind of all the equipment that he was using, the things he was able to see, kind of how the satellites
Yep.
work,
Yep.
the different.
So yeah, he was using set-top boxes in this particular case. So and like this, I remember this one. This was like the a set-top box, the satellite receiver box that he gotten out of a Hilton, and was
Right.
doing infrared hacking to get unlock some of the menus, and have those tune into different channels that you might not wanted to have been tuning into from the hotel, such as adult content and seeing other people use the web browser on their set top box in other rooms and all sorts of other fun stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Setting the auto programming to get channels that you weren't supposed to tune into in your room so you could see, like, you go into a hotel nowadays and the TV comes up and it's got your, hey Steve, welcome to your room, and you can view your bill and all that type of stuff. Like back in the day they were doing the same thing, but it was just on a specific channel. And if you could tune into someone else's channel for their room, you could potentially see what they were doing.
Yeah.
Fascinating stuff.
Yeah, it's wild. All the Bluetooth hacking, like, yeah, it was pretty wild watching ourselves with the TV remotes and
Yeah.
everything in the hotels and stuff you can do.
Yep.
It's also
Yep.
like we're joking about the banning of the flipper in Canada. I'm about to post a video. It's nothing new. It's nothing novel. People have been doing it for a long time. But using a flipper and a Proxmark 3, being able to clone hotel room keys and
Yep.
just how easy that is. It's ridiculously easy. And then you just walk up with your flipper to the door, pop, it opens up. I mean,
Yep.
these. I've done that hack. It's such a simple hack. I've done it at a hotel in Singapore. I've done it in Australia. I've done it all these places just to see if it's possible or if
Yep.
there's any differences. But they all use the exact same technology.
Yep. So yeah, typically the what we're finding, a lot of the hotels are using what's known as the MyFair Classic
Yep. Yep.
standard, and limited set of keys to be able to interact with the encrypted data there. And quite honestly, this conversation really starts bringing us into quote the wireless hacking devices. Are they worth it for what the title of the stream was? So if you can indulge me to start going down that way, and we're happy to
Yep.
go back to any other
Please.
conversation.
Please.
Um, so I think it's amazing that the access to wireless technology, from the chipsets to development boards to tools that folks are allowing us to use, is amazing. And the expense, like, I meant to pull it out of the drawer, a raw module here, but this device is the D-Stike Wi-Fi D-Author. It's a little bit older device, and this is like the Rolls Royce of them. It has
Hmm.
a wireless Wi-Fi chipset in it. It's the ESP8266. I bought some of these a couple years ago off of like AliExpress. I think I bought 40 of them, and they were $1.50 a piece. Like,
Wow.
the cost of the barrier to entry for cost for starting to be able to interact with wireless networks has really come down. You, the card computer, based around the Stamp S3, a full computer with keyboard around the Stamp S3, and it can do wireless attacks,
Hmm.
Wi-Fi based attacks. You want to go smaller? It's the arguably it's the M5 Stick, which is around the same architecture. The M5, like, look at this thing.
Yeah.
This could do Wi-Fi attacks. Like, and it was $20.
Yeah,
And it
so
was,
before I forget, speaking of that, that device looks like something I saw in an article recently where someone smuggled into a prison some wireless device that looked like that and was actually trying to unlock the gates because some of that stuff's done wirelessly.
yeah, yeah, I believe it. I believe it. Um, yeah, I was looking for my Marauder 32, and I saw it like 2 days ago because I was looking for something else. And I saw it and I'm like, oh, the Marauder 32. It's an ESP32 with a little screen, and you can do Wi-Fi attacks and so forth. Same thing with the Flipper Zero. You can do some Wi-Fi stuff with an add-on board. It's effectively a Marauder 32 using your Flipper Zero. And I've got all these tools. I'm holding them up. I'm showing them. Like, I have two. But you know what? For the most part, it's my opinion that a lot of these tools are complete garbage.
Hmm.
Right? I have them and I use them, um, but For the way that I'd want to use them, and I think about going in to do a lot of enterprise type of testing. These tools aren't really going to be super amazing for what I need to do. One, all of these tools with the low end chipsets to make them small and inexpensive, it's 2.4 gigahertz wireless and 2.4 gigahertz wireless only.
I was gonna say, what do you think the cost is to make it? If you wanted to make a flipper yourself and have a device with the same functionality, what would that cost you?
It's probably two or three hundred dollars. Um, we actually just saw one that we talked about on Security Weekly last week, and I'll see if I can find it real quick here. No promises. Um,
Because how much is a
it's
flipper zero? Like three? Are they around $300 or something?
I want to say it's about 160, 170 now.
Okay, so it came
They're,
down
they're
quite a bit.
yeah, they're not super expensive. Yes, so this one is the Hackbat.
Mm,
Um, the Hackbat is, from all and intents and purposes, I'll see if I can copy this over into the comments. I need to connect to my YouTube account. Figures. Steve, I'll send this to you in private chat.
okay.
The Hackbat, from all I can tell, it looks like an open source clone that you need to build on your own. Um, or around a Raspberry Pi, the RP2040 chipset, for effectively recreating the functionality of something like this. Now, the advantage of something like this versus what you're going to do with that particular project, this is done, the software is complete, and there's an active community around developing more software and more interactivity for something like the Flipper Zero. On the Hackbat, yeah, it's an open source hardware hacking platform for doing very similar types of things as the Flipper Zero. Do you know how much software exists for it right now? None. Like there's some stuff from the author that gives you the ability to do some very basic functionality. You want to do Wi-Fi attacks? Okay, spend the next 40 hours interacting with ChatGPT to develop some code for you, right? Or yeah, GitHub Copilot, something of the like. Right? Um, so yeah, it can be done. You're going to put a lot more work into that than using something like that. Now, uh, I want to get to Mohammed's question here too, but before I do that, I want to make sure I'm addressing all of the stuff with all of these fun toys, and I say toys. Most of them are 2.4 gigahertz for Wi-Fi. You can get some add-ons for like the Flipper to do other ranges, and some of the Flipper has some 900 megahertz stuff. Um, on the Wi-Fi side, 2.4 gigahertz. We also have 5 gigahertz networks now, which are incredibly popular. So you can only do so much with an inexpensive chipset, and we're not there yet for inexpensive 5 gigahertz chips in some of these tools. Uh, Also, a lot of the software that is currently available for all of these types of things, for the most part, I'm not going to be able to use very well in an enterprise environment with an ethical pen test or something of the like. Like the card computer and some of the other ones, like, yeah, I can do deauthentication based attacks. Like, that's not really hacking, that's denial of service. And what does that really get me from an attack perspective? Now, if I do that deauthentication, people are dumped off the network and they're just angry. And that is not a pen test. That is not a hack. That's just annoying.
Yeah,
So, and this is me speaking here. Admittedly, sometimes you need to do some deauthentication to get better
right.
stuff to further some of your wireless attacks, but it's only one component. And the next part of the component is being able to do some packet capture and doing some high level analysis. And you just can't do that on a flipper. Um, One of the other ones that I saw, like, was to be able to set up a fake captive portal for like you're going into a hotel network
Hmm.
or going into a hotel and you connect to Hilton Honors or whatever, open Wi-Fi is there, and then it redirects you to that portal where you log in. Well, only just recently have they started to implement one of those types of functions on something like the flipper, or some of these types of things like the card computer with the S3 and so forth. Um, Again, super limited, and now it's an open wireless network. You've lured someone to your stuff. You have no ability to actually provide network access after the fact, so you can't machine in the middle of their traffic. Maybe you get their credentials for that portal, but where did that really help you doing an enterprise pen test? Um, there are a couple of them that will do stuff like on the Wi-Fi side, um, being able to uh, do some capture of WPA, WPA2 um, authentication, so you can start cracking some keys. Okay, that might be a little bit more reasonable for the type of stuff that I'd be using it for an enterprise pen test. But I've still got to spend a whole bunch of time figuring out how I get the data off of this in an appropriate format so that I can put it to all the tools that can actually crack those passwords, because there's no way I'm doing it there. Uh, to your point about the RFID stuff and NFC for the hotels. Um, I don't have a lot of success all the time cracking hotel room keys with these devices, and there's a reason why there's two, because there's the default firmware from Flipper, and then there's the
Yeah.
unleashed firmware.
And
Because
Proxmark.
Yep, and the Proxmark. So using these, great. This fits in my bag, no problem. I can have a nice little interface with Dolphins. Um, Proxmark is a little bit more difficult. You want to do the real good stuff, you're tying it to a computer, right? And you're issuing commands to it, and you're not going to do that sitting next to someone on the bus, like, or maybe you are. You're not going to put it in your pocket. You're not going to get this stuff. But
Uh,
the attacks against the MyFair stuff, um, is super simple with something like the Proxmark, because it tests a bunch of default keys and then it effectively brute forces
yeah.
all of the other keys. You can't do a true brute force on these things. They just have a really big dictionary. And it's time consuming to go through that dictionary, and the dictionaries are not all inclusive, all of the possible keys. So,
Yeah, there
again,
was an article recently that showed somebody do that same style of MyFair card cracking, but they were able to do it right away. They just cloned the card and right away were able to get in. I don't
yep.
know what they used to do that, but they were demonstrating that that's a more significant issue because you don't have to go back to your computer and crack it.
Right, right. And oh, don't get me wrong. Sometimes you get lucky
Yeah,
by using the default set of keys or some very well-known keys, and there are still organizations out there that use the default well-known. And the Flipper Zero has a larger dictionary of more common used keys, and that works great. And when it works, it's fast,
yeah,
absolutely. But when you get one that's not using some of those that are out of the several thousand, the device just won't work. But you could use a Proxmark, that significantly more expensive, more high touch device for doing some of those types of things.
yeah.
Now, I will say there are some new attacks out there that James LV clued me into, that the Flipper Zero is actually amazing on, because it is so convenient. Um, and I don't remember which technology it was, but it is for some hotel cards. And with the Flipper Zero, you have the ability to identify the reader. So you press yours to put it to the reader, and this particular technology um, was you put it to the reader, and the reader gives you a set of keys. And now you can use those keys to interact with the cards so that you can make duplicates. That is amazing, and that's much easier on that. But that's like one of potentially 30 different types of attacks against all the RFID type of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Joe says, "Why
Yeah.
can't it do a brute force?"
So no one's written the software for it, right? It's a lack of something in the industry. I also don't know, and I don't know um, if there's enough computing power to do the full brute force. Um, the hard way to do the MyFair attacks requires about 4 gigs of RAM, because you're
Mm,
calculating all the potential keys in memory. Uh, so a true brute force for something like that with some of the later technologies. Probably wouldn't be able to do that on the flipper. So
Need a rainbow flipper.
yes, exactly. So what do you do if your network adapter doesn't support AP mode to do an evil twin attack? So this is really easy. Throw money at this problem. Go and buy a new wireless adapter is really like, if your wireless adapter doesn't support AP mode, there's nothing you're going to do to change that. It is likely something in the chipset or the drivers that are going to do that. Um, you can get super cheap wireless adapters that do support AP mode. There's a bunch from Panda. The Panda Zero B. I want to say these things are under about $20. They're USB, so you can pass them through to VM. Uh, those will support AP mode. Like,
Nice.
it's really about having the right tools. Sure, you can spend $6,500 on other wireless adapters, and we'll do that. But there's also super cheap options out there. Uh, Alpha has a bunch of super small ones. I think the biggest one here is you're going to throw some money at the problem. It's not potentially going to be a ton of money, maybe in the $30 range. Um, but do your research up front. Figure out which chipsets are there and whether they're supported in AP or master mode. So yeah, that if yours doesn't do it, it's time for a new one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's time for new furniture. So yeah, so Steve, on some of these types of things, there was some questions in there like, okay, so like, what would you recommend instead? And I'm going to say that I will. While I don't like these tools because they're not going to do anything good for me on an enterprise pen test, and yeah, these things have magnets in them, so now they stick together, so I can show two at once, right? Um, they are a gateway drug. They are very much a gateway. Like, you press buttons here and cool things happen. But why did it happen? How did it happen? Why did it not work when I did that? And you're not going to get that level of access from some of these tools. But the fact that you did it, and many of us have that in inquisitive set of mind, like, why did it work? Well, why did it work when I used it on here? And then you go start doing some research and you figure, oh, well, that's why it worked. And oh, I can use these other tools that now when I have these other tools, I can I can do all these other things that, you know, maybe my Proxmark was, I got the cheap Chinese clone off of Alibaba and it was $99, which was cheaper than like one of these.
Yeah.
And now I can hack all of the RFID, NFC stuff as well, and all of the attacks. So, admittedly, I have all these tools. Do I use them? Yeah, mostly for shenanigans and fun, right? Um, what the Bluetooth low energy attack that happened at DEF CON last year, where there's a guy wandering around with a Raspberry Pi powered via battery in his bag that was sending out the Bluetooth low energy beacon messages for Apple products. So if your Bluetooth was on your iPhone and you'd be walking through the convention space and all of a sudden like it says, hey, this TV wants to request the password from you. What TV?
Hmm.
And these AirPods want to connect to your phone. All right, so there's about 1,000 AirPods in here, and so he was spamming those types of messages. And as part of that discovery about spamming some of those messages, you could spam certain types of messages and so many messages that it actually caused the Bluetooth stack to crash on your iPhone, and it
Hmm.
would put it in a reboot loop. And then Apple had to go fix that problem. Can you do those attacks from here? Yes. Yeah. But do you understand why it works? Could you replicate new packets with something like that? You'd have to dig into code. You'd actually have to figure it out. And maybe this isn't the device for doing all of that type of fuzzing and so forth.
Yep. Totally.
So, yeah. So, I mean, I think that's really my diatribe. Like, I hate these
Cool.
tools and I love these tools at the same time. I have them, I use them. I was at RSA, like, was that last week? And Did I bring my flipper zeros with me? Yes, absolutely I did. And did I try to hack my hotel room key? Yes, yes, I did. Uh, was I successful? No, no, I was not. Was I successful with my Proxmark? Absolutely. Uh, so there's some value in these tools, but you really need to understand that you're definitely going to be limited by these tools. But it's really, to me, in my opinion, something relatively inexpensive, something easy to use to get your feet wet. Like that's part of the reason why I love these inexpensive software-defined radios that are receive only, because I can teach and I can introduce people to so much about RF and radio by using something super inexpensive to get them hooked. And
Yep.
then when they find out that there's so much out there that they can do, they can, oh, well, now I've got to go spend $300 to do the really cool stuff. Like I can do cool stuff, but to do the really cool stuff, maybe I need to get up my game a little bit. And don't get me wrong, I have a drawer full of these, and I have probably 15 of these deployed all over my house because they're super utility and that like they scratch that itch for getting me some RF and interacting with that stuff. So I'm torn between this. Like, yeah, they're garbage, but at the same time, they really get folks interested in some of
Yeah.
this type of stuff and can really spur that creative energy to turn folks into some amazing wireless hackers.
Yeah, the wireless stuff definitely gets addictive because you're not paying attention to it because you can't see it. But then as soon as you turn stuff on, start looking, you realize how much wireless stuff is constantly around you, and it becomes addictive to go and see like, well, is that encrypted? What is this doing? How's that? Can I replay this and cause this to happen? It's
Yep.
pretty fun.
Yep. Like I could think about all like sitting here in my office about all the wireless technologies that are around here. And like the ones that I know about, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth classic, Bluetooth low energy, Zigbee, Z-Wave, Thread, LoRa. Like just sitting here of stuff that I know about that I use in my home. But then there's the other things that maybe you don't think about, like cellular, satellite,
Yeah,
POXAG, pager trans receivers, the little button that you use to turn on your ceiling fan with or your air conditioner, um, the key fobs for your vehicles, um, GPS. Like GPS is coming down at us right now, and can that be interacted with? Like,
yeah,
there's just so much there for our connected world nowadays that it's staggering to see what's out there and what you can find and what you can play with.
yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, I guess we'll go ahead and wrap it up here. But thank you so much for coming on. It's a lot of fun talking about this stuff. I think
No problem.
maybe if you're interested, maybe let's set up another one in the future where you can maybe kind of show us some stuff in the house that you are okay with sharing and show some of the software defined radio tools because I think people would really love to see that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I've actually got some new devices that I need to test. So maybe I was going to say maybe we do that live, but no, we don't want to we don't want to tempt those demo gods.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, well, at least get it down to a point where we can start playing with some of that stuff. So great.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you. Have a great weekend, Larry. Coming up in just about 45 minutes now, we've got Yarden Shapir coming on to talk about some cool forensic stuff and how hacking is related to all of that. So join us for that coming up in a bit. Otherwise, have a great weekend and we will see you next time.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks.